Hello everyone, welcome to yet another Buddy webinar. Today we are going to talk with e-commerce automation for DevOps pros. And because of this, I decided to invite a really true DevOps pro. That's why I have Christian Dangle with me. He's a real specialist when it comes to DevOps. He's also a long-time Buddy user. And did I forget something? Christian, tell us a few words about yourself.
Thank you so much, Maciek. Hi, everyone. As he already mentioned, my name is Christian Dangel, and I'm head of technology at the Shopware agency, das ist Web, in Munich, so in Germany, near Munich. And we are a Shopware agency and are actually only using Shopware for our customers. So we're working with B2B and or B2C customers and building some rock solid online shops for them. And besides that, I also run the company LiveScore for sports broadcasting, playout graphics, like seen on MLB TV, NHL. And I'm also involved in all kinds of super fancy and fun IT projects, such as, for example, Docker, which is the Shopware Docker project that we will probably see today. And all kinds of cool things. And I'm a Buddy user since like day one. We are actually everyone at Das ist Web, and we use it for all our projects, and it just helped us so much. And that's why I'm super excited to show you a few cool things that you can do with Buddy and Shopware 6 today.
Yes, and my name is Maciek Pamowski. I'm your regular webinar host, and normally I work here as a WordPress ambassador, but thanks to this webinar, I have a chance to learn something about things different than WordPress, like Shopware today. So before we start digging into becoming those DevOps pros when it comes to e-commerce, if you have any questions, don't forget you can post them using the comments either on YouTube or on Facebook. It depends when you are watching us. Also, if you like our webinars, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You will be informed about every new webinar that is coming, and you will have a chance to watch all the archive ones and some other materials that we already prepared. We also launch a small poll on the YouTube. You can decide do you use automation or not. Answer and let us know in the comments. Okay, so I think that's all when it comes to introduction. Christian, the scene is yours.
Thank you so much. So let's switch on to the slides. Thank you. Perfect. So e-commerce automation for DevOps pros. We are, I hope everyone got it, focusing on Shopware 6 today, which does not mean that we're only doing Shopware 6. There are also things that you can use for different platforms, but all these samples are with Shopware 6. So I've already had the honor to introduce myself, so let's just skip that slide and move to what is more important than what I did. More what I love. I love to do all kinds of cool things and like to improve technology, platforms, and people. And that's why I'm super honored to be allowed to have a webinar today, because I want to teach more people how to create better deployments with Shopware or Shopware 6. So I know many of you are already familiar with Buddy, but still we have people that are not even involved in Shopware or Buddy yet. And that's the reason why I'm probably gonna tell you a bit more about how Buddy works, what Buddy is, do some pipelines with you. So don't be bored, stick to the end, because we are, of course, coming to more advanced stuff in the end. But I wanna tell everyone or bring everyone on the same page before we start with this. All right, so let's switch to our goals for today. We will be building a pipeline, a full pipeline together interactively. And I've prepared 3 different projects today. So one is deploying Shopware plugins. So that's a cool thing if you are a plugin manufacturer, or if you need something for your internal QA department to have those rock solid plugins ready to be tested before releasing those. Then we'll be talking about deploying full Shopware shops. So that's a pretty cool thing around flexibility for agencies such as we at Das ist Web are, or even if you are emergent and coding and deploying your shop on your own. And then we head over to the new cool thing with Shopware apps. So it's not only about Shopware today or with Buddy, of course, there's also way more you can deploy also when it comes to the Shopware world. And thanks to your questions that you've sent in when registering for this webinar, I was able to dig a bit more deeper into the advanced section, and probably I have some surprise in the end also for Buddy, if someone from Buddy is also watching. All right. So the repository for today, if you want to clone it, here it is. It's available public on GitHub. I would still recommend that you just watch this webinar, and afterwards you can play around a bit more with it. So 3, 2, 1. All right. So it's time. Let's build something great together. Our first sample is a pure Shopware plugin. So we start easy today. And let me just explain what we are going to see or to do. So a Shopware plugin based on a manual rollout. So we are coding in our local development environment. So on the left side. And we just push our changes to our GitHub repository. So the repository that I've just shown is not how you would do it in real world. So it's like one repository for 3 different projects. Normally, you probably have split those, but not today. So Buddy will then, as soon as we click the manual rollout or deploy button, before that, pull, of course, the changes. And then when we click the button, deploy it into our remote server, which is a hosted Shopware 6 version, into the plugins folder. So we'll be only deploying the plugin in a ready and already pre-installed Shopware 6 version. All right, so please share my screen, Maciek. Thank you so much. So you should now see our GitHub repository. So I did my best to have the README perfectly prepared for you. So you should be able to easily start this project. If we go to Buddy. So for everyone who is new to Buddy, this is how it looks like. So you basically have a list of projects. In our case, we just have one single project. Normally, as already mentioned, I would have 3 separate ones. So you create a new project, you can clone Bitbucket, GitHub, whatever. So there's plenty of stuff available. And basically, besides there's also repository hosting available, it's like just a Git client. So Buddy clones the Git changes and the Git repository to either the on-premise or SaaS solution. So let's skip this. I open the Buddy webinar project. And my project has already prepared, of course, a couple of different pipelines. So I've used the folders. That's one cool thing I can already show you to split our project in our single repository. So we have a plugin, full shop, app, and advanced for later on. So let me show you what we are going to do with the plugin deployment. I already have, so there it's possible to have external links for every pipeline. So you can just click on it and it opens up whatever is behind that link. So we have our Buddy plugin domain, and it says Buddy was here, and it has a wonderful, beautiful green background, right? So we are now building, really. It is. So we are now going to build a pipeline. I create a new pipeline and enter a cool name. So deployment test. I already have a real one. So just in case I mess up this one, we can use the backup one. But in that case, I just enter a name, enter a trigger like deploy on push, or in that case, manually bind it to our main branch and add it. And now to the cool thing. I heard the question, why do we need Buddy at all? Because it's a wonderful thing. It's like I always compare it with playing Lego for DevOps people or grown-ups. So it's like if I just compare it to other platforms or CI/CD tools, it might not at first. It looks a bit candy and funny, but it's seriously, it's amazing because you can interactively do whatever you want to do and just try and error, improve your whole system. So it's indeed an amazing thing, and it just helps you to get started, which is the first thing to conquer when you're heading into the whole CI/CD world, which I really highly recommend nowadays. Static HTML isn't so much anymore. Anyway, so first thing we are going to do is, let me just switch over to PHP Storm so you see a bit of the source code. I do have a folder plugin, and there is a source folder. So that source folder, or the content of that source folder, is basically the plugin itself. So in Shopware, that has to be in a separate folder. That's a Docker sample plugin. That's the name of it. And we deploy it inside a Shopware 6 installation, as already mentioned. So first thing we are going to do is we install probably dependencies. And I could use any of these actions. So there's plenty of stuff available. So SFTP, rsync deployment stuff, setup stuff, remote SSH, local shell actions, HTTP requests, custom builds, which we're going to use, PHP prepared images. So they are all based on Docker. So you can do whatever you want to do, even when it comes to monitoring Android, Docker building. So plenty of stuff. So if you know me, then you probably, hopefully, also know Docker. These are Docker images, especially made for being used with Shopware 6, for Shopware 6. And this is what we are going to use now because it has everything installed that we need to build Shopware 6 when it comes to storefront administration backend. And this is why I now search for the custom build action. So the custom build action allows me to spawn any Docker container and do things in there. I switch to environment and just use the Docker X in the latest version. Then one thing, with Docker, we're sometimes a bit restricted when it comes to what you're allowed to do in those containers and images. Buddy automatically bind mounts in IDE RSA pub key. So that could make some troubles. And that's a cool thing. You can simply use the root user and to avoid all these problems. If we switch over to the run command, then all we have to do is install dependencies. So in my case, because I have those 3 projects in my simple repository, I just switch over to plugin, source. And then what we like to do as something I would also recommend is doing things like makefiles to have that kind of abstraction layer, especially when it comes to DevOps. Because installing production or dev dependency might not only be Composer. You can use npm and or yarn or whatever is happening down there. But when it comes to your DevOps team, the one who manages deployments, you might want to help him by just giving and providing that abstraction layer. So in my case, I would just install the dev dependencies, whatever is behind that. So I just say make dev, use the argument for b to avoid cache problems, and probably give it a name and say install dev dependencies. All right, so let me now run the pipeline. When the pipeline is executed, it automatically has a working directory inside buddy, which is something we can browse with the file system on the right side. And we're going to do this right now. So that was fast. If I just open it to full screen, you should see that Docker Flex is being pulled, started, and then those commands are being done inside the container, and with Docker, everything was already available, so it's all installed. And if I now open the browse file system, we should see that the plugin has a purple icon, which means that it has a runtime files. And we have all vendors cloned, installed on Buddy. So that's the first but most important thing. You just use any Docker container and do whatever you want to do. And that's the flexibility. If we now do the second thing, because I want to give you some recommendations on what you should actually do when it comes to plugin or other things. So we have the dev dependencies. Next thing is probably you want to test things. I really hope you're one of those people who have unit tests. So the next thing we're going to do is we clone a pipeline or an action of a pipeline, and we just use our deployment test and use the previous one, install dev dependencies, because we don't want to do the same thing with Docker flag setting up again. So we just call this review, unit test, whatever. And this time, again, with the make file, we have something that we love to do is make review. The make review is just a combination of all these tools that are necessary for our QA pipeline. So that's the cool thing. If there's a downside, you can split it into different actions, and you have that visual feedback, whether if the PHP unit tests fail or our static analyzers, PHP stand, ESLint, or if you just have the benefit of having that one simple command related only to the project. And maybe one day someone adds a new make a ESLint bit. And then you don't need to touch anything again in Buddy. It will just run the additional tools. So that is why we love to do things like this. And that's it. Make review. And I really hope that I don't have any typo in there. But if I do now start it again, because I've tried it before the webinar, so the local cache did already work. That's why it was that fast. But as you can see, next thing, it's done. So we have our PHP unit test, and somewhere should be our PHP stand. So I guess that's enough for today, because that would be too much. But this is how easy it is. From this point on, you already have some kind of if you just do an automatic trigger, you always know as soon as your pipe or quality pipeline fails. But we want to do more. We want to deploy it. So we go back to the action. Again, clone our install dev dependencies and just move on to reinstall the production dependencies, because as we all know, you probably don't want to deploy PHP unit and all these hundreds of folders. So I just switch over to make prod, and that's it. Now to the actual deployment. We will skip that run. It will work anyway, hopefully. So next thing is rsync. With rsync, this is just one option to deploy anything to your server. I just open the browse and say, okay, plugin source, the content of that source. And then there's something cool. Buddy has the option to provide variables, because as we all know, credentials are something you don't want to show somewhere. So I just use the, let's say, server host, server user, and in that case, the server password. But I would strongly recommend using the pubkey option. Buddy has pubkeys per pipeline. You can upload your global one, and that's it. Then I should already have some feedback by browsing the remote path, and just deployed in my shop plugin. This is a hosted Shopware 6 into probably the folder, plugins. Just mixed it up with apps. And there's our Docker sample plugin. And that's it. Probably I want to give it a better name. So this is already a working rsync. And let's give it a try. I just run it. And I really hope that I don't screw up my system, but I have the backup pipeline anyway. So
I mean, if something went wrong, that's good because it shows that the tests are working. So, in some way.
yeah. Okay, perfect. I forgot something. This one. So archive mode off, this, and recursively delete. And then I could simply retry it.
Also, this is a great opportunity to see exactly what happened in the logs. The logs are very clear, and when something goes wrong, it's really easy to read what happened, and it's really easy to fix. So
exactly. And sometimes I did also see some kind of interactive shell where you can just type inside buddy and work in a terminal.
I'll be honest. I hope that something went wrong a bit earlier, so you could show this feature. Because yes, if something goes wrong, this interactive mode to debug things is something so useful. Personally, for me, it saved me hours because you don't have to redeploy everything. You just can fix and pinpoint the exact moment when the bug happened. So this is something really amazing. But Christian, that did everything good. So sadly, we can't show this feature.
I'm used to work with Buddy. So next thing before we probably save some time, switch over to the actual pipeline and see these changes is remote SSH, because that's probably something you want to do every time or need every time. So it already suggests me, because that might be the next thing after an rsync. So a pretty cool thing, SSH. And in my case, I want. We have some things about imperative versus declarative. So it's always a declarative way, but we have an imperative approach. Means we want to make sure and ensure that a plugin is configured and installed for our QA department, and we have the declarative commands for this. So the next thing is we want to install, make sure that our plugin is installed, or whatever plugin in a full shop we have. So what I will do now is just do the same thing with the host, user, password, and have a remote. Actually, it's not that important. I could just test it. Oops. And then I probably head over to my backup pipeline and copy paste those commands. Save some time, and I really don't know it by heart. So what we are going to do now is it's all based on Docker and Docker on our remote server. So we are just using Docker execution commands to run PHP bin console plugin refresh inside the container, install our plugin or uninstall our plugin, install it again with dev null pipes and true to make it fail safe in case it's already installed or something happens, and then clear the cache. So that's totally up to you. And with that, I would say let's head over to the real pipeline, and I would love to show you how it works. So, because the concept is now always the same. So deployment pipeline, and let me just run it. So we have our green background, and it says buddy was not here. So we switch over to our plugin source code, and maybe say plugin buddy was not here. Oops. And remove the source, and change the background color to be blue. All right, so let me just whoops. page and push my changes. Yes, we use GitHub. It's amazing. No advertisement. And head over to our buddy pipeline. So we should normally, if you have like a different projects with different repositories, you should see that you're one behind for the deployment. Now we have like 10 because it's all the same with all sub project. But if I now go to deployment plugin and say run, I already know that my test or latest, please use real subjects, will be deployed. Actually, 10 commits would be deployed if I now run it. We see what Buddy is doing in our full pipeline. So a few things is what we've just built together. We install the dev dependencies, run our review, unit test, static analyzers, production dependencies, rsync, install the plugin. Then I've decided, because it's all about that single plugin in the first sample, I've decided to configure the plugin in a separate action. I could do it in one, then clear the cache, then prune the Cloudflare cache, because sometimes you just want to use Cloudflare and sometimes you just have a cache, especially when it comes to images, for example. So don't forget this. It's pretty easy. I can't show you how to create a new one because it shows a few more domains probably with my account. But as you can see, we've set our Docker sample plugin to active with our configure. We use a Docker execution command, PHP console cache clear of Shopware. We prune the Cloudflare cache. And then we do something really interesting. We do a verification check. So that check, let me first see if it's working. I refresh our page and we see, we don't see, but it says buddy is not here and we have a blue background. So that went all pretty good so far. And it was pretty easy to set up because we almost did it together. If I just show you what you can and should do, it just helps you, is as soon as everything cache is cleared and everything is deployed and ready, try to create a what is it, a HTTP monitoring action. So we just open the domain and make sure that our text HTML contains like service hotline or anything that might not change all the time or ever, but you already have some live feedback if it did work at all.
Yes,
And
because using this checking for string is very important because we discussed it before that not once nor twice we did something like this, that we just asked for a server status and sometimes the server status may return to 100, but the page might be blank. So it's a great practice to check for some string that is the best in the footer, because then we know that the whole website rendered probably. So this is a very good practice to do, and it's very simple. So even if you are starting your adventure with CI/CD, remember this action. This is something so useful.
Perfect, thank you. In addition to this, if you want to do more, I've prepared something else. So just do a small. Let's do a small recap. So pretty easy, straightforward stuff. We build things on body, deployed, run remote commands. In my case, Docker executions. Prune our caches and check something. And then if you are a really good plugin manufacturer, you probably have a QA department and also automated tests, maybe based on Cypress. If you are familiar with it, or if you know me, you know that I'm a big fan of using Cypress and Cypress in general. So onto a new feature in Buddy. You can run separate pipelines in a pipeline. That means I've created a pipeline for Cypress tests. Why did I do this? Because I probably want to reuse those things or have those running nightly. But there's one thing. Please keep that in mind as well. If I just open it, so that's an action run a different pipeline. I've just selected the Cypress Smoke pipeline because it makes sense to automatically test smoke and sanity test. So QA knows that it's at least testable. There's a wait until pipeline has finished. So this really depends, and because Buddy is so easy to use, you can focus on other things like how do you define a successful execution of your pipeline? Is it if it's deployed and then buddy is triggered and it's green, or Cypress is triggered, or would you rather wait on the result of Cypress? And if Cypress fails, then the whole deployment didn't work. So that's a definition thing. Also, please keep in mind, if you overdo this with running other pipelines and always wait on those, you have like a maximum concurrency of 4, I think. So deadlock possible can happen. So always be aware that this is actually the reason why I'm more the fan of having one single linear pipeline that I really know what is going on. Sometimes better have a redundancy instead of complexity. So if I just open the Cypress smoke pipeline, what it does is it uses a prepared Cypress action, which uses the official Cypress probably included Docker containers. Why? Because speaking of the whole UI graphics stuff, it's a bit hard to run Cypress inside a Docker container, in a Docker container. That's why Cypress prepared it for. But besides that, it's pretty simple. So I assume, and if I just switch to PHP Storm, I have, of course, a working Cypress setup in here. Again, with a make files, we have like make install, make open UI, or make run, where we can provide a URL, which I would recommend, because we can now simply navigate, install it, and then run our Cypress test on our remote system. As we would do it locally, we would run it on our local host. We can run it on a remote system. That means it will test this page, this beautifully readable page that we've just deployed, if it did still work. And sometimes, and that brings us to a new buddy feature, smoke and sanity tests should always be fast, but sometimes you have like a full regression suite of probably a few hundred tests that might take a while. So you probably see it if I just group by trigger status, that those are run manually, while the Cypress all test is based on a recurrent pipeline. So it's like building cron jobs. So if I just go in there, we should see that this is a cron setup, and then it just runs every night. And we have things like vulnerability scans, Cypress tests, and things that just take a while that we run during the night. And as soon as we get back to the office or home office today, we have the reports and everything ready, what has happened in that particular night. So that is everything when it comes to deploying a single plugin. So Maciek, if you could now switch over to my slides again. We are now going into a more interesting and more complex scenario. So this is about deploying full Shopware shops if you're an agency for customers, or also if you have your own very own shop. So diagram and visualization again. So we have the same setup, local, GitHub, push. And in this case, we are going with the CI/CD way. CI/CD, speaking of continuous integration, continuous delivery, not deployment. That means as soon as we have changes, buddy will pull these, obviously, run our testing, building artifacts, and then gives us a call to action button to approve it. And as soon as it's approved, it will be deployed. So, and then we just do full deployment and stuff like that. So we can switch back to my screen sharing. And I head over to the full shop. So let me just cancel that one so that we have like a good clean state. I will now do a change. So the domain or page that we have is like white and buddy was here. So it's the same, but I think it's okay. So we will again write buddy was not here and probably add it too. So if you're doing lots of testing, then you know that you probably don't want to use the same text because you always want to assert things somehow. That's just how I am. So subscriber, and buddy was here again. That might be a cool thing. Let me just push that with a, well, again. I'm always wondering if people start to visit my public repository later on and see all these wonderfully named commits in the history. They will probably judge me. So
Yes,
that's all.
because commits should be very informative. We should write what did we change, what files and why, and stuff like this. And writing again or something like this, it's not the best practice. But in some cases, we know how it is.
Exactly. So you should already see that so much more is being done here, and we go through it now. So while that one is, I think, probably just pulling a bit, let me explain it. When you deploy full shops, first thing you want to get rid of is credentials. Actually, whenever you do anything, right? So buddy allows you to have all these different variables. If we just switch over to the variables, we already used it at first. So we have like server host password. I do also have the database use and password already prepared. So let me just probably a hiccup. At least I didn't try to use my hammer for a Tesla car and then the window breaks.
Something is waiting. Oh yeah, because
Something is
there were some actions before.
Oh yeah, let me just let's just run it. All right. So okay, now it's working. So what we have in here is we create a .env file at runtime. So how does it look like? Oops. So first thing, always we have that local shell command, and then we do something like this. And we just echo pipe in a environment file and just store it on buddy. The cool thing is it also works with credentials, variables. That's the reason why I've just showed you this. And then we can simply, I mean, normally you had probably also database, stuff like that. But this is how we create the .env. And then we head over to the execution. The next thing is, of course, dev dependencies, unit tests, everything we know. And then comes build storefront, build administration. If you are already familiar with Shopware, then this might be the question when you ask, do I need a database? Why don't I need the database? So that's a pretty cool thing. Shopware allows you, since I think it's Shopware 6.4, to build those things without database. So what you have to do is, if we just go to our project, I've created, I think, a dump command. So two things, bundle dump and theme dump. And then you have those, I think it's var cache. One should be in files, the theme stuff. So that has everything on board. So the plugins and themes that should be built for when creating the artifacts without the requirement to have the database. And in addition to this, with the config packages, storefront, you also just need to add that configuration to the YAML file to use those static files. And that's it. When you develop it, just make sure to check those files in. That's also a cool thing if you want to be in charge of what is going on based on a source code file. And yeah, so then it's pretty easy. We can simply run make build storefront. Again, the abstraction layer, make build administration. And this is only I'm jumping around a lot. Sorry for that. But this is only theme compiling, cache clearing, assets installation, as well as build administration assets install, which then works out of the box directly on Buddy without a database. And that's a cool thing. We are now having all these artifacts ready to be deployed. So that's the reason why it now asks us if we want to proceed. So we approve the delivery, and then we have a few things. So one of the things is if you are using workers, so that means the whole messaging stuff in the background, which we highly recommend, maybe also turning off the stuff that's going on in the administration and be in charge of it using supervisor cron jobs. I'll show you in a minute. Then that's probably the first thing you want to stop, because it might still run on the previously deployed or old legacy PHP code. And then in my case, I did so many preparations all these previous days that I somehow screwed up something. That's why I have a simple change mod and ownership in here just to fix permissions. But that's also a cool thing. So you can even do things like this. Then we have our rsync. We install the plugins. We run migrations, database migrations. How does it look like? We just run it also again in our shop full container, database migrate all, then our migrations of our plugins that we want to execute, because when we create shops for our customers, it's not like having thousands of plugins, and the customer is, I would say, allowed to install his own plugin. So we really need to take care of that it's all working perfectly, and this helps us. And then we do DAL refresh index to also have that one refreshed. Next thing is we install crons and start the workers. So if we just go back to stopping the workers, that is just a PHP bin console messenger stop workers. So not that interesting, but more interesting could be the installation of crons and restarting the workers. So what we are doing now is we use even buddy even for the cron job stuff. So that really depends on the hoster, the whole concept you're working with. In that simple scenario, we just create a cron's temp file, echo pipe, two things in there, the scheduled task runner with a time limit of 217 seconds, and the messenger consume with a time limit of 50. And all we do is we just load that cron in that file. So what about what's going on? So schedule task, of course, it has to schedule things. But with the messenger consume, this is an easy sample. So we start a messenger consume that lasts for a maximum of 50 seconds. Then it starts again, and we do this like every 5 minutes. Normally I would do every minute, but that was my fault, sorry. So that is one option. A different option would be to use supervisor or anything any other thing. What I would recommend, going back to Shopware, however, is to turn off the admin worker and probably auto update if you have like more high class, medium enterprise projects, because otherwise it would start while you are in the administration, and then you really have it. You're in charge of everything that is going on. So clear cache, stuff like that. And then we have something new, lighthouse checks. Buddy even allows us to create lighthouse checks with thresholds. So what we usually do is we have like our requirements engineering concepts, and we say, I put this down, you could use it, but I am using it for the maximum allowed time to first byte or first contentful paint. So that means you have your requirements and you're able to automatically, after deployment, to check these maximum allowed thresholds. So you know as soon as a pull request might screw up your page loading time for a product detail page, listing page, search page. So actually, this would be more like desktop, mobile, listing, search. But I think you get the idea. So it's all about having automated stuff directly represented to you. If we now head to our page, which is, I think, this one, we have Buddy was here again. So it did work. And that brings us to our last sample. If we go back to our slides. Thank you so much. To our Shopware apps. So short but interesting. The app system connection is working like this in Shopware 6. So you have here on the left side your Shopware 6 installation, where we, let's say, just receive a new order. And there's an app client installed, and that one just sends webhooks and communicates with a different platform. So that could be Symfony, that could be ASP.NET, C#, whatever, you name it, that's totally up to you. And in our sample project, also from Dockware, we just saved that order, and we have like a independent rating platform where a user can rate the products he purchased, and that is notified back to the Shopware shop using the API and visible as a product review in the Shopware shop. So that means you can deploy whatever you want to deploy in the exact same way with Buddy. So let's just see it with a few things. So it's almost the same setup. But this time we just into var www HTML just deploy our application. So that means I would just show you how it works. If we go back to the screen sharing, we are on Buddy Shop, and Buddy Shop has the app already installed, also through our pipeline. And all I have to do is now just do this product, add it to a cart, and probably do any, okay, that's a different profile, so I really have to create. Otherwise, I would have some options for fakes. But yeah, some typing never hurts nobody, right? And I'm probably a Mr. Okay, complete order. We have cash on delivery, so nothing fancy. That's it. If we go to our Buddy ratings page, so that's like a completely different website. There's our new order, 1004, probably, yes. And we can simply open it, review our product. Super cool. Let's give 5 stars. It's the best. This is not Shopware. I submit it, and then I can have a deep link to go back to my Shopware shop, where I should hopefully see my new review being transferred back using the Shopware API. So that's just the basic concept, but now to the deployment. So if we just go to the first page, probably we have product review system. And let me just, app. So this is not even Symfony. It's just a self-made, really easy thing. But yeah, product rating system this time. So again, we have the wonderful test. And back to Buddy. In this case, I think the caption in my slide was wrong. So that is like a CI/CD with continuous deployment. So it already works or is being triggered. rsync, just pulling it. And then there shouldn't be a lot of files. So it's done. And if I just refresh it, we have a product rating system instead of review system. So that means nothing fancy, but it also works with Shopware apps or any other thing. So if we now go back to our slides, please.
Of course, we are we are switching back.
Thank you so much. these are the first things you probably want to come up with when developing Shopware things, but there is more that can happen. So I hope you understand. Maybe one day a webinar part 2 or anything like this, we can't talk about everything, but I try to give you an answer on these 2 things: how to work with database backups and how to also create end-to-end tests with Cypress inside Buddy. So if we switch back to my screen sharing, thank you. You can use or do different things. So like a backup of the database. So in that case, I have the automation instead of CI/CD build where it's related to the repository. I can just use monitoring backup things that are not related to any source code and do whatever I want to do. In my case, it's just the export of the database where I do not see the command. Let's go down here. So it's just using variables, MySQL dump onto a file, and that's it. There was a question about how to work with database anonymization, syncing it across different environments such as production, staging, and so on. So I could only tell you how we do it without showing you how we do it. So I would recommend doing something like of course, a backup on maybe if it's possible on the live system. So like a shadow MySQL clone where you can spawn a new shadow instance, run your anonymization scripts on it, and then export that clean anonymized SQL file, transferred maybe SCP or remote to any system that you are in charge of. Please always make sure to have, speaking of GDPR and security, everything as secure as possible, but that's totally up to you. And then you can, there's one thing. So we have a clean anonymized database, and you can simply download it to your local dev setup, to your buddy setup, staging setup. There's a gap between having a snapshot, having a clean snapshot, and preparing something for a certain environment, such as staging. So my recommendation is how we basically do it is to make sure it's as clean as possible, remove payment, live API keys, make sure to maybe keep 100 of orders, but anonymize these so that nothing is in there. There are new tools. I think there's I forgot it, a framework originally probably from Magento that also has a template for Shopware where you can anonymize it. Also, Shopware has commands for anonymization, and I think Sona from Shopware, employee of Shopware, a good guy, is also working on something that makes it easier for you. And the other part, as soon as you have that snapshot, is probably always make sure that some things need to be prepared. So like update the domain, add test API keys for payment plugins, because that differs on every single environment, locally, staging, testing. And if you have that wonderful differentiation, then I think you're really good to go with that. So next thing is in my sample is how do I run Cypress inside Buddy on a Docker container inside Buddy before actually deploying it to any other system. So that's also possible. We use a virtual Linux machine. And all I do in here is I run Docker, start a Docker play, so Shopware 6481, wait 30 seconds. People who know me are pretty much familiar, maybe hopefully, with those things. And we just spawn a Docker container, install our plugin, upload it, install it, and then we run our Cypress test using the Cypress included container that we just did, but this time on our local host. So we are still on Buddy. And that's a pretty cool thing because you can already, if you have that setup with having the option for your, let's say, full shop, customer shop, a clean database, you could import it into Buddy. Start your Shopware shop, make sure that every setup pipeline is also done in here, and then you should be maybe no images, but because that would be too much, but maybe do some kind of redirect to a testing system if it's somehow required. But you can then also run your Cypress test for your real shop inside Buddy before you actually do anything with the source code itself. And if we now go back to the slides, please. Thank you. This is where I hope maybe someone from Buddy is also watching. I also have a surprise for Buddy because we are the maintainers and inventors of Docware. We now have an official documentation support for Buddy. So there's a full guide and documentation about all these kinds of things you can do with Docware, and also when it comes to CI/CD. So after GitHub, there's also a new page, Buddy. So how you run buildings, testing, and also how to run your Cypress test inside Buddy. And if you are missing things, just let us know, and we can figure it out and add it to the page too. So almost an hour. That's it. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that many of you do now finally have some kind of bird's eye view what is possible. And I really hope out of my heart that you are trying to do more automated things to avoid problems and go more with the full CI/CD way. Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. It was a lot. It was really a lot. Personally, this is also the part why I do those webinars. I constantly learn something, and thanks to webinars like this, like really, it was really terrific. Let's see. Are there any questions? So let's start with this one. Please explain about the Shopware plugin section deeply. So would you recommend?
I think that might be a question more when it comes to starting with Shopware 6 and developing Shopware 6. So that's a cool thing with Shopware 6. The documentation developer experience is really good by now. So they have full guides on how to create plugins, how to create themes, how to create app systems. So I would recommend try to check out probably the Docware containers. So that's like a one-liner, and then you have like any Shopware 6 version ready. And then you can simply, using the tutorials of Docware, Shopware, just simply start developing plugins. Also, Docware comes with a sample plugin that we just saw. So you have your subscriber CSS, SCSS already ready to be used. So that might be a good thing to start with.
Yes, here we get also a similar question about before getting into theme module or plugin development. So as Christian mentioned, the documentation is really great, and this would be the first thing, just to start by reading and doing, because there is no better way of creating plugins than just trying to develop something. You also mentioned it, but what's the best way to sync database table between staging, for example, CMS layouts, configuration, and so on?
I would
think
have
you
an
mentioned it
add-on
in the
on this.
webinar. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
I have when it comes to CMS layouts and stuff like that. So that is something that I can't really answer it, because it really depends on your flow. So sometimes our customers want to, most of the time, they want to do their own content. So it really differentiates if what you deliver as an agency in our case. Do you only deliver the tools that work? So means custom CMS blocks and elements, and then they can build whatever they want? Or do you also kind of deliver the initial content? Because that is then different when it comes to QA. Because then you have to sync CMS pages and stuff like that. Otherwise, I would probably just skip those or most of them. And I think that's one thing Sonar is coming up with, to maybe have some kind of configuration to skip a few pages. So it's always the gap of having your QA being able to, without an import destroying anything, create custom CMS pages to test things and functionalities, but also having some kind of real good looking shop during development or testing too. So I would more go, before I would start with the technical approach, more go into the workflow approach, how the project should actually be tested during development.
So it's the best typical IT answer we can get. It really depends because yes, and here is a bit more technical question: why the images are broken when are syncing complete prod system to a localhost Docker container or any other server for that matter? Is there some ersync option that fixes timestamp issue?
That might be a pretty simple one. So Shopware in the .env file, usually in the .env file, has a CDN strategy for media files. So there are things like ID, file name, things like this. What it actually does is it uses, especially when it comes with the default with the timestamp, uses data, creates an MD5 hash, and then it's the typical large blob storage system where you chunk those hashes into all these thousands of subfolders to have those large storages. So that means you probably have a different configuration with the media strategy on your production system and in your local system. So usually, if you just really copy everything down, make sure to have the same configuration, clear your caches, and it should actually work. I would still recommend when you start with huge projects, maybe go with a custom strategy pattern where you have things that are not really dependent on a timestamp. So maybe just a plain file name. So whatever is really like statically be available in the database. So as soon as you restored snapshots on a different system, it would lead to the exact same MD5 hash. So that is what I would recommend. But hopefully it solves it for you.
I think yes, this might be an answer. Also, we got a poll running with the start of this webinar about do you run different tests before deploying your stores online? And the good news is that more than 75% said yes, but we hope that those 25% after watching this webinar will also start testing everything in an automatic manner because Christian really explained everything very throughoutly, very deeply. So the good thing is you will be able to rewatch this webinar soon. So like I said, it's a great way to start your adventure, and it's also a really good way to start doing everything step by step. I mean, this especially this second pipeline for the whole shop, it was very long, so it may look a bit scary, especially when you are starting your adventure. But don't worry, start with something simple, deploy, and then start adding step by step. First, test a thing or two after deploying. For example, Lighthouse, and is the website working at all? Because those are quite important things. And then start writing tests, start adding some different tests because we have many layers of things we can test in our application. So let me just check once again. Do we have anything? No, I think this was the last question. Christine, I want to thank you very much. You really did a wonderful webinar here, and thank you again. And let me show you what we have prepared for you for the next for 9th March, because this will be the date of our next webinar. We will have Luke Downing, who will explain how to supercharge testing with Pest PHP. So this might be very interesting if you are into testing and you can connect those things, because learn Pest PHP, then try to connect it with Shopware, because why not? Uh, Also, remember, if you want to be up to date with our webinars, you can join our meetup group called Buddy CICD group. You will be informed about every new webinar that is coming. And of course, if you liked all our webinars, remember to subscribe on YouTube. You will be informed about all the new content, and of course about and you will be also have a chance to watch all our archive materials that we got. So saying this, thank you everyone, thank you for watching. It was and Christian, again, it was really great having you here. Thank you very much. So have a nice day everyone. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye, guys. See you in the Slack community.